Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
My younger sister grabbed my sleeve and yanked me straight toward the lead architect she had been obsessing over for months. She was beaming with such smug pride that I almost felt a pang of pity for her. See? I told you my sister was top of her class and brilliant. Was I lying? The architect didn't say a word. He didn't even look at her. His eyes locked onto mine, not with the casual curiosity reserved for a colleague's relative, and certainly not as a polite greeting. He looked at me like a man who had suddenly forgotten why he had walked into the room. Nina didn't catch it. I did, because this wasn't the first time I had lived through this exact moment. In my past life, that single glance ended up costing me my firm, my reputation, the only man who tried to protect me, and eventually my survival. And the girl beside me, wearing that innocent, wide-eyed smile, was the exact same girl who would later sob at my memorial while wearing my stolen vintage watch. My little sister had no clue that the renowned architect she was pining for had just fallen for me instantly. So I smiled back, not at him, but directly at her. Because this time, Nina, I won't erase my achievements just so you can stand out. This time, I'm going to let you drown in the very spotlight you envied. Nina's fingers dug tightly into my forearm, just enough to show her hidden tension. Elena is incredible, isn't she? Her voice was artificially bright. She wins every blueprint competition, every corporate grant, every urban design award. Honestly, I wonder if there's anything she can't build. On the surface, it sounded like sisterly admiration. I knew the game. Nina praised me the same way someone pulled back the curtains just to point at dust on the glass. She made sure everyone noticed me first so she could play the neglected victim later. Julian Vance finally blinked, his tone deep. I've seen your blueprints before. Nina let out a quick, nervous giggle. Of course you have. Everyone in the city has. Elena is the golden child of our firm. I pulled my arm gently from her grip. Not golden, just overworked. Nina's smile stiffened slightly. Julian's gaze sharpened, as if he had picked up on the unspoken tension between us. In my previous life, I would have panicked the second I saw that intensity in his eyes. I would have taken a step back, acted cold and distant, and tried to force Julian toward Nina before she could feel sidelined. It didn't save me back then. She still wept to our parents. My family still blamed me. The story became, Elena stole the man Nina loved. This time, I didn't back down. I turned straight to Julian. If you came here to discuss the project with Nina, keep your eyes on Nina. Don't make the mistake of looking at me long enough to make her upset. Nina's chuckle came half a second too late. Elena, what are you even talking about? Julian didn't look away from me. That sounds like a warning. No, it's historical data. His eyes shifted briefly toward Nina. For the first time since she pulled me over, Nina noticed the shift. Her bright smile shrank into something fragile and helpless, the exact expression she always used to recruit protectors. Elena, I just wanted you two to connect. I know you don't have to make it sound so hostile. I didn't. I glanced down at her hands. Her fingers were tightly clenched around the hem of her jacket. Her face looked sweet. Her knuckles looked furious. Our mother appeared at our side carrying 2 wine glasses, taking in Nina's lowered head before looking at anything else. Nina, sweetie, what's wrong? There it was. Never what happened. Always what did you do to Nina? Nina shook her head softly. Nothing, Mom. Elena didn't do anything wrong. The phrasing was masterfully calculated, soft, injured, forgiving, and somehow making me look entirely at fault. Mother turned her glare toward me. Elena. I took one of the wine glasses directly from her hand. If I did nothing wrong, why does everyone look ready to hold a trial? Mother froze. Nina's eyes widened in fake shock. I didn't mean it like that. No, you never do. Julian watched the entire exchange in silence. Good. Let him observe the real dynamic from day one this time. That night, I stood in front of my vanity mirror and opened the velvet case sitting on the wooden shelf. The vintage watch was still inside. Gold casing with small diamonds around the bezel. Father had gifted it to me after I landed my first major architectural contract. Nina had cried that evening because she felt her birthday necklace wasn't as meaningful. The following week, Mother quietly asked me not to wear it around Nina. In my previous life, I complied. After I died, Nina wore that exact watch to my memorial service. She stood near my framed photo, pale-faced, weeping perfectly, her wrist resting on her lap so everyone could see the gold piece that once belonged to me. She was my sister, she had sobbed. No matter what happened, I adored her. Everyone offered her tissues and hugs. Nobody questioned why a grieving sister was wearing the exact piece of jewelry she had coveted for years. I snapped the case shut. Not this time. In my past life, I had tried so hard to be the good older sister. That was my fatal mistake. After Julian looked at me that first day, I avoided him for weeks. I ignored his calls unless Nina was standing beside me. I turned away whenever he walked into the studio. I even told him, with pathetic selflessness, that my sister had feelings for him and that he should give her a chance. He looked at me back then with the exact same expression he had today, like he wanted to ask who had convinced me that love required self-effacement. Nina still wept. She cried to Mother that I was playing hard to get so Julian would chase me harder. She cried to Father that I constantly made her feel invisible. She complained to senior partners, clients, and family friends, anyone willing to offer a sympathetic ear. Then the anonymous messages started circulating around the firm. Elena is letting Julian lead her on. Elena says Nina is embarrassing herself. Elena thinks some people don't belong in senior management. I denied it until I was hoarse. Nobody believed me. Nina cried first, and in our family, tears were treated as incontrovertible evidence. Then came the urban development project, my low-cost sustainable housing concept. Every draft, financial forecast, and site map suddenly appeared under Nina's name at the annual design showcase. When I stood up in the boardroom and declared it was mine, Mother squeezed my wrist tightly beneath the table. Not now, Elena. Don't ruin her big moment. Father looked at me as if bringing up the truth was an unpardonable breach of etiquette. Nina accepted the commendation with glistening eyes. My brilliant sister inspired this whole concept, she announced to the room. The crowd applauded. I remember Julian standing at the back of the auditorium, not clapping. I remember him approaching me afterward with a digital drive containing file modification logs and security camera footage he had collected on his own. We can prove you wrote this. I wanted to trust him. But Nina saw us talking. By the next morning, the narrative had morphed again. Julian was covering for me because I had seduced him. I was envious of my younger sister's breakthrough. I was attempting to steal both her project and her romantic interest. My parents stopped taking my calls. Colleagues stopped sitting with me at lunch. The firm removed me from the major accounts I had spent years building. Julian fought fiercely on my behalf, which only made the accusations louder. By the end, I had lost my professional standing, my project, my family, and my future. And when my life fell apart completely, I finally understood the brutal reality. Nina hadn't destroyed me because Julian looked at me once. She destroyed me because that look gave her the ultimate excuse she had been waiting for. At my memorial, she wore my watch and leaned into Mother's shoulder. Nobody noticed the gold bezel. I did. From wherever the dead go when their anger remains unresolved, I watched her trace the strap like a trophy. That was when I learned the truth too late. Nina didn't want my affection. She wanted my life stripped down and handed over to her. The following morning, family breakfast started in heavy silence. Nina sat across from me, picking idly at her fruit bowl. Her eyelids were faintly swollen, as though she had spent just enough time crying to leave visible proof. Father folded his morning newspaper. Elena, did something happen yesterday with Julian Vance? I spread butter across my toast. You were standing right there. You saw everything. You know what I mean, Father replied, his voice firm. No, I don't. Nina set her fork down softly. Dad, please don't start with her. I'm completely fine. Mother immediately reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I let out a short laugh, not loud, but clear enough to make all three of them freeze. Nina flinched. Elena, Father warned. I met his gaze dead on. If she's so fine, why are we holding a tribunal over breakfast? Mother's lips tightened into a thin line. Nina felt embarrassed because Julian was staring at you instead of engaging with her. Nina's face drained of color. I didn't invite him over, I said, setting my knife down. I didn't call him, I didn't touch him, and I didn't flirt. Nina was the one who dragged me over to meet him. Tears welled up in Nina's eyes. I know. I just felt stupid. I've admired his work for so long, and he looked at you like. She let the sentence hang. She didn't need to finish it. The silence did the work for her. Mother sighed softly. Elena, you know how sensitive your sister is. I wasn't born tough, I said quietly. I became tough because you only ever protect the daughter who cries first. The room went dead silent. Father's expression hardened immediately. That is completely unfair. No, it's just familiar. Nina began to weep softly into her napkin. Right on cue. I finished my toast in peace. None of them knew how to react when I refused to offer the usual apology. That afternoon, Julian sent me a direct message. May I speak with you privately? I stared at the notification on my phone for a long time. In my previous life, I would have blocked his number the moment Nina started crying. Back then, I told myself that keeping my distance was an act of kindness. That didn't stop Nina from forging messages between us anyway. This time, I agreed to meet in a busy coffee shop near the Urban Planning Institute. 15 minutes. He was already seated by the window when I arrived, 2 untouched black coffees sitting on the table. I wasn't sure what you preferred, he said as I sat down. Good. Don't start trying to figure me out just yet. The corner of his mouth curved up slightly. Noted. I kept my bag resting on my lap, maintaining my posture. Julian observed me carefully. Why did you warn me yesterday? Because Nina has been obsessed with you for months. I know, he said calmly. She seems to think that gives her some sort of claim over my time. It doesn't. No, but in my family, emotional outbursts always override facts whenever Nina is involved. Julian rested his hands on the table. I never gave her any encouragement. I never led her on. I know that. Then why do you treat me like a hazard? Because the last time a man tried to take my side, I ended up losing everything and standing alone in the wreckage. I took a steadying breath. Because Nina isn't as helpless as she pretends to be. He didn't laugh or brush it off. That caught me off guard. Most people usually did. What makes you say that? Personal experience with being convicted before a crime has even been committed. Julian leaned back, studying me. I saw a spark of deep interest in his eyes, not simple attraction this time, but intense focus. The kind that was far more dangerous. You don't want me around. Not because of you, I replied. Because of what Nina becomes when she feels entitled to something she can't have. His gaze didn't leave mine. And what if I decide to make my own choices? I stood up from the table. Then be prepared to pay the price for them. When I returned to the apartment, Nina was already standing inside my home office. She was positioned right beside my desk, her hand hovering just inches above my laptop keyboard. The second she noticed me in the doorway, a sweet smile spread across her face. I was waiting for you, she said, her tone perfectly casual. I wanted to see if you could give me some feedback on my upcoming presentation. I glanced at the laptop screen. Locked. Good. What presentation? The Regional Sustainable Design Competition, she replied. You mentioned you weren't submitting an entry this term, right? I had said those exact words in my previous life. Not in this one. I haven't made up my mind yet. Her smile froze for a fraction of a second. Oh, I just assumed you were too slammed with client work. I'm not. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest. That's wonderful. I mean, tough for me, of course, because you always take first place. There it was again, the polished compliment wrapped around a hidden hook. I walked over to the desk and snapped the laptop screen shut. Nina, why were you touching my computer? Her eyes widened in hurt surprise. I wasn't. I just walked in and saw it sitting there. It was closed when I left. She paused, then let out a light, wounded laugh. Why are you acting like I'm trying to steal from you? In my past life, she had done exactly that. She had stolen my entire architectural portfolio right out of this room, a comprehensive community revitalization blueprint designed for underprivileged neighborhoods, complete with financial models, corporate sponsorships, and structural plans. It was the first project I had ever created that felt completely mine. Nina submitted it under her name. When I confronted her, she wept, claiming she just wanted to feel capable for once. My parents begged me to let her have the credit, reassuring me that I could always draft another design. Later, when the stolen project won top honors, she stood on stage and thanked me for inspiring her. This time, the RAIL file was already timestamped, encrypted, backed up on secure servers, and submitted to the competition board under a sealed entry. The file sitting on my laptop was nothing more than bait. I offered her a cool smile. "You're right. Why would you steal from me?" Her face lit up with immediate relief. "Exactly." I stepped past her and held open the office door. "Knock and wait for permission next time." Her shoulders dropped. "You used to never mind me being in here." "I also used to apologize whenever you hurt yourself on my boundaries." People change. By that evening, the first seed of her trap had been planted. Nina sent a group message to our extended family. "I'm so glad Elena is entering the design competition too. Honestly, I just wish I could have one achievement of my own without it turning into a rivalry." My cousin forwarded me a screenshot of the text with a single line attached. Is she starting her drama again? In my previous life, even our relatives had rushed to comfort Nina. This time, not everyone was blind. Some had simply stayed quiet until now. I saved the screenshot. Nina didn't need enemies to destroy her. She only needed an attentive audience. A week passed. Julian kept a respectful distance for the most part. He sent a single message after watching me leave a firm dinner early. "Are you holding up all right?" I stared at the text, then typed back, "No, but I'm used to it." His reply arrived a minute later. "Being used to unfairness doesn't make it acceptable." It was the kind of statement that could make an exhausted person lower their guard. I deleted 3 different drafts before responding. Don't offer me sympathy in private if you aren't prepared to state the truth in public. A moment later, his text appeared, understood. The next afternoon, Julian arrived at our family home for a scheduled consultation with my father. Nina wore a soft, pastel blue dress and feigned surprise when she saw him in the foyer. "Julian, you came." "I have a meeting with your father," he replied politely. "Oh, of course." Her smile faltered slightly, her eyes starting toward me where I stood by the staircase holding a project folder. Mother touched my elbow, whispering beneath her breath, "Elena, don't make things awkward." "I'm just standing here." "It's the look on your face." "I'll try to leave it in my room next time." Julian overheard the exchange. His eyes shifted between Mother and me. Nina let out a high-pitched laugh. "Elena is always so intense." "She's just joking." Father stepped into the hall, frowning at me. I said nothing. Julian spoke up, his voice steady and quiet. "She seems entirely straightforward to me." The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Nina's smile completely vanished. That was the moment she stopped dropping subtle hints and started actively preparing her attack. Before Nina launched her attack, my parents tried to wear down my resolve so I would accept the blow. Mother walked into my studio workspace carrying the gold vintage watch in her open palm. I had left it on my desk after checking the watch face. She held it like it was a piece of evidence in an ongoing crime. "Elena, maybe you shouldn't wear this watch to the gala tonight," Mother said quietly. I looked up from my drafting board. "Why not?" "Nina is already feeling incredibly anxious." "About my watch?" Father stepped into the room behind her, his expression rigid and unyielding. "Your sister has been under immense pressure. This architectural grant means everything to her career." "It means everything to mine, too," I replied. Mother sighed deeply, as if I were intentionally choosing the most difficult answer possible. "No one is saying it doesn't, Elena. But you've already accumulated so many accolades. If Nina presents her work first without feeling overshadowed, it will build her confidence. You can always submit your next portfolio later. You've always been the stronger one." There it was again. Stronger. The word they used whenever they wanted me to quietly survive being mistreated. I reached out and took the gold watch directly from Mother's palm. "You keep calling me strong because it makes your neglect sound like a compliment." Mother flinched. Father's brow furrowed tightly. "That is completely out of line, Elena." "It's the exact truth," I said. Nina is insecure, so I'm expected to step back. Nina is nervous, so I'm expected to dress down. Nina wants recognition, so I'm expected to hand over my platform. You call it maintaining peace when it only ever costs me my work. Mother's eyes glistened with frustration. We are trying to protect this family. No, you are trying to keep Nina comfortable. Neither of them had an answer for that. I set the watch back onto the desk, deliberately keeping it out in the open, not locked away in a drawer. Tell Nina that if she wants confidence, she needs to earn it herself instead of stealing mine. For the first time in my life, Mother left the room without continuing the argument. The next person at my doorway was Julian. He didn't step inside. He remained standing in the hallway with one hand in his coat pocket. Your father asked me to review the firm's donor presentation schedule. Of course he did, I said, leaning back against my desk. I overheard enough to know I shouldn't pretend I heard nothing, Julian said quietly. Then you also understand why standing anywhere near me is a liability, I told him. Nina. My parents. The entire room that instinctively shifts to comfort her the second she sheds a tear. Julian's gaze lingered on the project models behind me, then shifted to the watch resting on my desk. I was never involved with Nina. I know she harbored feelings. I know she imagined a future between us. But I never gave her a reason to believe it was mutual. That won't matter to anyone once she starts crying. It matters to me. I broke eye contact first. In my previous life, I had been so consumed with proving I hadn't lured him away that I never stopped to ask whether he had ever belonged to her in the first place. Julian's voice softened slightly. I am not taking your side just to spite Nina. You barely know me, I pointed out. I know how you hold your ground when everyone around you is trying to force you to bend. My hands tightened against the edge of the desk. Don't idealize my trauma. I'm not, he paused, his eyes steady on mine. I'm respecting your resilience. That was far more dangerous. Simple kindness I could push away, but respect made me want to trust him. Elena, he continued, if she tries to rewrite what happened, let her try. I care about the truth, not about what keeps the peace. I looked at him then. He didn't step any closer. He didn't demand anything from me. That was the first reason I didn't push him away. The second was that I was exhausted from shutting out the only person in the room who bothered to look at the facts before passing judgment. Then watch very closely at the gala tonight, I said. I will, he replied. And I won't try to play the hero. I mean it, I added firmly. If I go down, let me fall holding my own evidence. Julian's jaw set into a firm line. I can stand beside you without trying to fight your battles for you. A faint smile touched my lips. Good. Remember that. 2 days before the gala, the forged messages surfaced. Mother slammed her phone onto my desk, with Father right behind her and Nina lingering in the hallway like a tragic victim. Elena, explain these right now, Mother demanded. I looked down at the screen displaying printed text exchanges. Elena, Julian is so bored of Nina's desperation. Elena, he keeps finding reasons to message me privately. Elena, if Nina gets her feelings hurt, maybe she should learn not to aim above her level. Mother's voice trembled with rage. How could you say such malicious things about your own sister? Nina covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't want to show them, but I couldn't keep lying to protect her. I examined the screenshots calmly. The fake persona they created for me used absurdly exaggerated punctuation. It was almost laughable. Father's expression was ice cold. Is this why Julian keeps asking about your project files? I handed the phone back. No. Nina's tears spilled over. You're not even going to apologize? No. Mother looked stunned by my composure. Elena, I will address this publicly at the gala if I have to. This family will not be disgraced in public. Father snapped. Then you should be far more careful about who you trust in private, I replied evenly. Nina stepped toward me, her voice breaking. Why are you doing this to me? I only ever cared about him quietly. I never asked you to step aside. I looked her dead in the eye. In my past life, I stepped aside until there was nothing left of me. You're right, you never ask out loud. You just cry until everyone else demands it for you. Her face contorted in anger for a fraction of a second before she collapsed into fresh sobs. Mother rushed over to hold her. Father stared at me as if I had just struck a child. I turned back to my drafting desk and locked the drawer. For 10 minutes, I stood in the quiet room with my hands flat on the wooden surface. Then I reached over, picked up the vintage gold watch, and fastened it around my wrist. This time, you will never wear what belongs to me. The annual Metropolitan Design Gala was hosted at the Grand Atrium Hall, a sea of crystal chandeliers, tall champagne towers, pristine floral arrangements, corporate sponsors, board members, city officials, and journalists who loved charity galas most when their names appeared in the program. My architectural proposal was displayed on a large preview screen near the stage under a temporary title, Nina's title. The judging panel hadn't announced the grand grant winner yet, but everyone in the room already assumed she had crafted the visionary design. Nina stood near the front of the stage in a delicate white dress, looking fragile and ethereal, her eyes slightly glossy as if she were carrying a heavy burden. She had dressed specifically to evoke pity. I wore a tailored emerald suit, and on my left wrist rested my vintage gold watch. When Nina saw the watch, her eyes froze. A second later, she forced a gentle smile. "It looks lovely on you, Elena." "I know." Her fingers tightened around her evening clutch. Julian arrived alone, dressed impeccably. Nina spotted him and made a slight movement in his direction, but caught herself, remembering she was supposed to play the injured victim, and stayed close to Mother instead. Her performance began right before the final presentation. A wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The crowd turned instantly. Nina's eyes filled with tears before anyone could even ask what happened. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I could go through with this tonight, but I can't keep smiling and pretending." Mother rushed to her side. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Nina looked toward me, not directly, but just enough for the room to follow her gaze. "I don't want to ruin things for Elena." 100 heads turned in my direction. Father's face darkened instantly. "Nina, tell us what's going on." She shook her head weakly. "No, families shouldn't air dirty laundry in public." It was a masterclass in manipulation, playing the victim while pretending to protect the hypocrite. A prominent board member nearby murmured softly, "Poor girl." Nina lifted her trembling phone. "I found these messages. I tried to pretend they didn't exist. I told myself Julian and Elena were free to do whatever they wanted, and that I had no right to feel hurt because Julian never made me any promises." At least she admitted that much out loud. But then her voice broke dramatically. "But Elena was mocking me to him. She knew how much I cared. She knew." And then, my main design files completely vanished from my laptop this morning. I don't want to accuse my own sister, but I don't know what else to believe. The main screen behind the podium flickered and changed. The forged chat logs appeared in full high-definition view. Whispers swept through the room like wildfire. Mother turned to me, her eyes filled with tearful outrage. "Elena, apologize to your sister right now." There it was. No investigation, no hesitation, no request for proof. Just apologize. Julian took a step forward to intervene, but I raised one hand, silently stopping him. "Not yet." Nina whimpered softly, "I just want my sister back." My laugh was soft, calm, and echoed through the quiet hall. "Not this time, Nina." I pulled a remote clicker from my pocket and pressed the central button. The main screen went completely black. Then, the first video file began to play automatically. It was an ultra-high-definition screen recording taken directly from Nina's laptop. The video showed her cursor dragging fake text bubbles into an online chat generator, typing my name at the header, manually altering the timestamps, and saving the generated images into a folder labeled private. The entire hall went dead silent. Nina's tears stopped instantly. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she was about to faint. I didn't." She stammered, her voice failing her. The next file opened automatically, raw metadata logs and a verified digital export directly from my phone service provider. No messages to Julian. No insults. No backhanded comments. Only one single text sent from me to Julian 2 days prior. "Don't offer me sympathy in private if you aren't prepared to state the truth in public." A heavy hush fell over the room. Julian looked up at the screen, then turned to me. His expression was devoid of pity, it was pure, unadulterated respect. Nina's voice trembled uncontrollably. Someone planted that on my computer. I nodded calmly. Then you'll be relieved to know there's more. I clicked again. Security footage from my home studio played on the main display. It showed Nina entering my office after midnight, opening my laptop and copying the bait file onto a cat-shaped silver flash drive. A few guests turned their heads to stare at the silver cat key charm hanging right off Nina's evening clutch. Her hand instinctively clamped over it. Event security personnel began moving toward the stage. Nina scrambled backward. No, I was just reviewing it. Elena always helps me with my projects. The screen split down the middle. On the left side, Nina's submitted design. On the right side, my original, sealed submission sent to the Regional Design Board 7 days earlier. My micro-watermark appeared in the corner of every structural blueprint layer, a subtle geometric mark woven directly into the building's facade concept, present on every financial model and every slide Nina had practiced reciting all week. The head of the design committee stood up slowly from the front row. Miss Nina Vance, pardon me, Miss Nina Bennett. Please step away from the podium. Nina looked desperately at our parents. For the first time in her life, neither of them moved. The head judge's voice was stern and absolute. The grant award is officially suspended pending a fraud investigation. Based on the conclusive evidence presented here, this project cannot remain under your name. Nina opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had used up all her tears too early. For the first time in our lives, Nina cried and not a single person in the room mistook it for innocence. I walked up to the stage and took the microphone directly from the stand. Since everyone is already paying attention, let's finish this properly. I clicked the remote once more. The next slide displayed recovered private chat exports between Nina and her close circle. Nina, as long as I cry first, Elena always looks like the bully. Nina, people forget who actually came up with the idea as long as I look more heartbroken. Nina, if Elena succeeds, I get forgotten. So she has to take the fall. And finally, a message sent to her friend regarding Julian. He looked at her once, and she still acts like she didn't steal him from me. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was no longer confusion. It was absolute judgment. Nina staggered back against the podium. I was just hurt. Julian stepped onto the stage, taking a position beside me. Nina turned toward him as if he were a lifeline. Julian, please. You know how much I cared about you. You know how I felt. His gaze remained cold and level. Nina, I was never yours. You had an unrequited crush. I gave you zero encouragement and zero promises. Her face crumpled completely. Don't say it like that. Do not turn your envy into Elena's crime, Julian added firmly. The room absorbed his words instantly. Elena had never stolen Nina's partner. There had never been a partner to steal in the first place. Nina turned desperately to Mother. Mom. Mother's hands were shaking violently. She took one small step forward, then stopped dead in her tracks. That single hesitant step was the sound of Nina's world shattering into pieces. Father looked down at the floor, completely lost for words. I looked at both of them from the stage. You didn't lose me today. You were losing me every single time you believed her fabrications without ever asking for my side of the story. Mother's tears began to fall, real ones this time. Elena, we didn't know. No, you never bothered to ask. Father couldn't even raise his eyes to meet mine. Nina saw it all. She saw the realization washing over them. Not an apology for her, but immense regret for me. That was the moment her sweet facade died entirely. You had everything. Her voice screamed through the speaker system, raw, sharp, and ugly. You were naturally talented. You were smart. Everyone praised you without you even trying. I had to play the sweet one. I had to act frail. I had to cry because that was the only time anyone ever paid attention to me first. Mother gasped softly. Nina, stop. Nina spun on her. You made me like this too. All of you did. Every time Elena won an award, you told me I was special anyway. Every time she accomplished something, you comforted me as if she had personally taken something from me. So yes, I took her blueprints. Yes, I fabricated those texts. Yes, I put on a performance. Because if I didn't, she would take all the light just by standing in the room. I looked at my younger sister. For a fraction of a second, I saw the child she used to be. Then I remembered the vintage watch she wore at my memorial in my past life. I remembered the forged messages. I remembered Julian having to defend my honor against a mob that wanted me ruined. I remembered my own tragic end. The last remnant of pity vanished completely. I spent my entire life giving up parts of myself to keep you happy, I told her quietly. You called it love because you never intended to give anything back. Her lips trembled, her composure entirely gone. You weren't invisible because I succeeded, Nina, I added, my voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. You were invisible because without my shadow to hide behind, you had nothing of your own to offer. The words hit harder than any outburst. Nina looked around the grand hall. Nobody moved to help her. Not mother, not father, not Julian, not the wealthy donors who used to hurry to wipe away her tears. Her audience had finally seen behind the curtain, and without her performance, she was just a person standing under the lights holding stolen work. Security firmly escorted her off the stage, retrieving the silver cat drive from her bag. The board formally removed her name from the event program before the night was over. I stood at the podium and accepted the official grant announcement. The project was officially restored to its rightful designer. My name illuminated the grand screens above the stage, Elena Bennett. Not Nina's older sister. Not the difficult daughter. Just me. I am officially done shrinking myself to make others comfortable, I said into the microphone. At first, there was silence. Then Julian began to clap, a clear, firm sound. Then another person joined. Then the entire hall erupted into applause. I didn't look back at Nina as she was led away. That was my gift to myself. After the showcase ended, I stepped out onto the quiet second-floor terrace behind the hall. My hands were finally trembling, not out of fear, but from the overwhelming relief of no longer suppressing my own truth. Julian found me there a few minutes later, pausing at the glass doorway. May I join you? I nodded softly. He walked over and stood beside me at the railing, leaving a respectful distance between us. You knew she would react like that, he said, looking out at the city's skyline. I knew the pattern, I replied. That sounds heavy. It was. He turned to face me. I didn't fall for you because Nina brought me over to meet you. I took notice of you then. I fell for you when I realized how many years they spent trying to make you shrink, and you were still standing tall. My eyes stung with sudden warmth. I don't want a relationship built on the wreckage of my family. Her downfall came from her own actions, Elena. Not yours. I looked at him directly. And what if I need time to heal? Then I wait. A faint smile touched my lips. That sounds like a commitment. No, his tone was soft, genuine. I won't wait like a man expecting a trophy. I'll wait like someone who respects a boundary until you're ready to open the door. That was the moment I knew he was entirely different from the narrative Nina had tried to construct. He didn't come to rescue me. He stood beside the truth and let me take back my own life. A week later, my parents requested a meeting. I agreed to meet them in a neutral conference room downtown, refusing to return to the family dining room where I had been judged so many times over breakfast. Mother looked smaller, frail. Father looked worn and aged. Nina was nowhere to be seen. Good. Mother's fingers nervously twisted a handkerchief. Elena, we are so deeply sorry. I waited in silence, letting the weight of the room settle. Father cleared his throat, unable to look me in the eye. We failed you as parents. Yes, you did, I said. I didn't try to soften the blow. We assumed that because you were resilient, you needed less support, he admitted, his voice rough. I needed parents, not a judge. Mother wiped a tear from her cheek. When Nina cried, it felt urgent. When you were hurt, you went quiet. We assumed quiet meant you were fine. No, I corrected her. Quiet meant I had already learned that defending myself only made everyone angrier. Mother let out a shaky sob. We created this monster, didn't we? Every time she cried, we ran to save her. Every time you succeeded, we made sure she was comforted first so she wouldn't feel left out. Father closed his eyes tightly. And we conditioned you to disappear. Hearing them finally admit it didn't magically heal the years of pain. But it confirmed that the damage had been real all along. You called me mature when you actually meant convenient, I told them. Mother broke down completely, not a theatrical, polished cry like Nina's, but the sound of someone confronting the reality of what they had destroyed. I don't know how to fix this, Elena. You don't fix it by expecting me to forgive Nina, I said firmly. And you don't fix it by asking me to pretend everything is normal. Father nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Space. Mother looked up, heartbroken, but I kept going before pity could weaken my resolve. I am not cutting you off to punish you. I am protecting myself from the toxic dynamic you built. I can interact with you as my parents, but I will never return as Nina's sacrifice. Neither of them argued. That was the first step toward genuine accountability. Nina's final desperate move came 2 days later. She posted a long statement online. I love my sister deeply. I made mistakes because I was terrified of losing her affection. I hope one day Elena understands that even broken people act out of pain. She didn't post it out of remorse. She posted it because a public apology was the last play left in her playbook. For 10 minutes, sympathetic comments began to trickle in from uninformed people. Family is complicated. Maybe her sister was too harsh. Then Julian sent me a screenshot. Nina had messaged him privately 5 minutes before posting her statement. If you tell people Elena drove me to this, I'll claim you manipulated me to get close to her. You owe me after publicizing my private life. Another screenshot arrived from my cousin. Nina had texted her, if Elena looks cold enough, people will move past the files. I just need one influential person to take my side. I posted both screenshots directly beneath her public apology with a single line. This isn't remorse. This is just the encore. The public sympathy evaporated instantly. The board issued a final statement revoking her professional credentials permanently. Her remaining friends dissolved their group chats. The narrative was dead. The next afternoon, she returned to the apartment and tried to open my office door. The lock had been changed. She stood in the hallway, staring at the handle in disbelief. Elena. I opened the door halfway. Her eyes dropped immediately to my wrist. The gold watch was firmly in place. Her face twisted into bitterness. You're wearing it again. I am. It makes you look arrogant. No, I replied calmly. It makes me look like myself. Her eyes filled with that familiar, predatory envy. You never needed it the way I did. I looked at the gold watch she had worn at my memorial in my previous life. No, you only wanted it when it belonged to someone you destroyed. The tears came instantly, automatic, practiced, desperate. But no one came up the stairs to save her. Not mother, not father, not a single person trained to shield her from the consequences of her own actions. For the first time in her life, Nina wept without an audience. I closed the door. Months later, my sustainable housing initiative launched under my name. Young designers and students filled the workshop room, carrying sketchbooks and bright ideas. As I watched them collaborate, I realized something fundamental. I hadn't just reclaimed a career, I had reclaimed my right to exist without permission. Julian attended the opening ceremony quietly, without grand gestures or seeking attention. Afterward, he joined me by the main architectural display. It suits you, he said, gesturing to the vibrant room. I touched the gold watch on my wrist. I know. It was always mine. He smiled softly. Everything here is. My parents stood near the entrance, quiet, respectful, and no longer making demands. Nina had relocated out of the city after the board's final ruling. She was no longer my responsibility to fix or protect. Julian offered his hand, not to push me, not to claim ownership, but simply to walk alongside me. I took it. In my past life, Nina wore my watch at my memorial while everyone comforted her as if she were the victim. This time, I wore it myself in front of the world while she stood alone with no audience, no applause, and no sister willing to dim her own light ever again. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.